Good evening, everybody. I'm Ben Derbyshire. I'm the president of the RIBA. Welcome to our wonderful building at Portland Place, our home of architecture. And well done for making it down here, not upstairs to something which apparently is called Be the Business. No doubt at all, this is where the business is, not upstairs. And apropos, I never miss the opportunity to let everybody know that proudly during my presidency, absolutely not of my own personal doing, but the RIBA is in incredibly good health. We are completely debt-free, completely refinanced, and I shall be in March discussing with our council a £20 million programme, the purpose of which is to continually improve access to members and others to our programme and also to improve the way in which we communicate our mission of advancing architecture to society generally. So we're very happy to be in good shape. Be the business, be RIBA, in the words of a recent campaign. Our thanks to VitrA Bathrooms for partnering the RIBA and sponsoring this terrific series of talks, which showcases the best of contemporary and emerging voices in architecture. We're delighted to have you with us here this evening. Thank you very much indeed for your patronage and sponsorship. The programme is not only here in the UK, but it's going to be international too. And on the 18th of April, Daniel Libeskind will be appearing as part of this programme in Istanbul, having spoken here first on the 16th. So note for your diary here, the 16th of April, and then Daniel is going off with VitrA to speak in Istanbul on the 18th. We're live streaming this. We're live streaming all of our events now at the RIBA, so everybody who's a member and others can watch the proceedings on architecture.com. Thrilled to have Emre Arolat here this evening. Welcome, Emre. Co-founder of Emre Arolat Architecture, one of the largest architectural practices in Turkey, with offices in Istanbul, London, and New York, which is where I first and last met Emre at the occasion of the AIA conference. Emre was just that very evening off to Turkey to vote in the presidential election. It's up to him to make of that what he will and speak to you of the implications of the outcome. I'm going to say, though, on his behalf, that his wonderful humanistic architecture, which you'll be seeing in a moment, is definitely, I think, a democratic undertaking. And architecture is inevitably political, and I think we note through history how the relationship between states where the power accrues to one party, let alone one person, tends on the whole to produce the opposite, a much more reactionary architecture resulting from much more immediate patronage of one person or one political point of view. So we celebrate your work and we look forward to hearing more about it presently. After the speech from Emre and his presentation, the two of us will join together on the stage. I don't want to have to ask him any questions at all, and I'm pretty ruthless. I'm perfectly prepared to sit in silence while the questions come from the floor, so do be thinking about that in the course of the lecture. Housekeeping points. Do keep your mobile phones on and tweet for England. Actually, no, it's too late. The lights are down. I was going to take a picture of you all. It's rather good. Everywhere that you're not sitting, there's a sign which says Design Update #1. So it feels like a pretty positive room. So Emre's Twitter handle, for those of you who don't know, is @Emre Arolat Arc. And when you tweet, no doubt you would like to give him credit for the wonderful display of his work. There's no fire alarm planned, so if the alarm goes off, make for the door. With that, I'd like you to welcome Emre Arolat to the stage. Thank you very much indeed.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ben, for this non-political introduction. Very open. It was great. And of course, many thanks to RIBA and the VitrA, of course, for hosting me here in this legendary building. Today, I'm going to talk about our work in EAA, mostly, together with the resources, the reasons, and the arguments of our architectural practice or approach and our understanding of context. Okay, speaking about context, on one hand, we all know that in societies which are under the influence of capitalism, glamorous, charming, and seductive sources are increasing rapidly, and we know that nowadays the object of desire is everywhere. This is the climate of all that is solid melts in the air, as Marshall Berman stated ingeniously, and no matter in which geography, sparkling icons, flashy and dashy high-rises emerge as the new symbols of the cities. On the other hand, the world is burning out. This time the truth melts in the air like all other solids, and it won't be wrong to consider this situation as an epiphany of neocolonialism. I think that a specific question or a kind of certain subject could be meaningful to discuss in this moment. What could be the role of architecture or the architect in this period within this global context? Okay, I'll get back to this later, but let's go at a very different part of the world now, just shortly to a country which is highly affected by capitalistic tendencies. As you may know, Istanbul was the first capital city of Ottoman Empire during the, not first, but the last empire, during the nearly 500 years. And Atatürk, who is the founder of Republic of Turkey, decided to move governance center to the center of Anatolia and assigned Ankara as the new capital in 1922. It was a quite critical decision because, as you can see, this new capital was like a big village rather than a real city in those days. Yes, it was small, but on the other hand, it was the kind of a fortress of republicanism and one of the most distinctive symbols of Turkish westernization. Meanwhile, my parents, who are both architects, established their office in Ankara, and they were participating in architectural competitions in order to get a job. And finally, they won the first prize in the competition of Zonguldak Hospital in 1963. I'm not sure, but it may be a sign. I came to this earth right at the same time. After some years of hard work, they moved to Istanbul. It was, of course, a much more vibrant, dynamic and crowded city, also the financial capital of the country. Along the line, I was planning to become a professional car racer, but somehow I found myself in the architectural school in Istanbul, and just after my graduation from the University of Mimar Sinan, I went to US in late 80s and worked as a junior architect for about a year. After an extremely, I can assure you, pleasant and fruitful period in Georgetown, once again I was in Istanbul and joined to my parents. As a very brief summary, I can easily say that Arolat Architects was my principal school. But after 17 years of hand in glove, I felt that I should graduate from there. And in 2004, we established EAA together with my partner Gonca. It was the forming period of Turkey's last generation progress, and we had lots of work. Most of them were quite challenging, and we were becoming more and more sensitive about our way of doing architecture. Just after 4 years, we became one of the most prolific offices of the country with more than 100 young architects. But even with this large group, we were always keen about conserving our ethos and spirit, and we tried so hard to not to become a large-scale, toneless corporate office with a lack of soul. Instead, potentials of public benefits, sensitivity about the context, and let's say internalizing various situations with all their distinctive characters were always the main issues in our office. We design at different scales in different countries, and we face various contexts as well. Since I'm not a very strong believer of globalism, especially in the field of architecture, I always pay a great attention to learn, to understand, to internalize the distinctive characteristics of different cultures, futures patterns, specific hallmarks of all societies, physical, historical, sociological, and of course political layers of the settlements. I never believed in a kind of architecture which is only an art of generating icons. I'm quite sure that it's much more than this. I believe that the intellectual and spiritual fields of this occupation charge the architect with a huge responsibility. This kind of duty is much more important and definitely more complicated than being an unconcerned producer of the image industry or a mediator of a society of spectacle. I'm so sorry to see most of our colleagues having difficulties to position themselves in a niche where they could be more genuinely critical. In fact, season upon critical thinking keeps you awake. I realized that I became kind of a compulsive interrogator over the years, and the good news is I'm not alone on this journey. I have a bunch of colleagues working together with me in EAA, and we keep asking questions. We learn from people, from roots, traditions, from different cultures. We learn by using dialectics and of course by the new techniques. Sometimes we can even learn from wind, sun, or rain. It's an educational process of depth analysis and an attempt to feel the scent of the trace. Okay, the scent of the trace is the name of our new book, which will be published very soon by Oro Publishers. It's a kind of expose my inner dialogues during the design process. I'm quite excited about that. Another book among many other publications, which consist of architectural works, was published by Rizal in New York 5 years ago. Philippe Jodidio and Suha Özkan were the editors. After some long dialogues between us about our architectural philosophy, they named the book Context and Plurality. And now we are working on a new one, and which will be published soon, and the name will be different, but I don't know what it is now. In 2014, I mean after 10 years that we established EAA, although we were very busy with some really large-scale projects in Istanbul, I don't know why, but we opened a second office here in London. Since then, we're dealing with various kinds of projects, such as mixed-use residentials and hospitality buildings in our office in Clerkenwell. Okay, here comes some complaints now. I was elected into chartered membership of RIBA in 2013, and this year I elected as an honorary fellow of American Institute of Architects, but I'm still a Turkish architect. And believe it or not, just between us, I'm not sure if this is one of the most favorable titles that you can hold in this international architectural world. Whatsoever, finally and luckily, we were successful in getting a considerable commission and the approval after some very bureaucratic challenges, which are not so different than the rest of the world. It's a residential complex which will be located in Reading, and a composition of existing parts to be renovated together with various additional volumes. In the beginning of the design process, as usual, we dealt with very detailed research about the context to discover the distinctive characters of this specific area and feel the scent of the trace. Contrast, contradictions, consistent and harmony were some of the keywords of this process, which was just another dialectical discourse in the office. We tried to force the boundaries as much as possible, but the constraints were quite massive and challenging in this historically important Minster town. These are some sketches concerning the compositional studies together with some initial approaches about the essence of form and materialization. And this is the final composition of the existing part, which is in red, to be renovated together with the other additional volumes. And this is the final thing. Some detailed CGIs. And this is the new main entrance, because the entrance was different, and the lobby, and some interiors. The investor named the project as 5975 Reading, and the construction has just started. These are from my last visit to the site, and we're still working on some other projects in the same area, and I hope that we will have some more. Okay, coming to US, we opened our office in New York nearly a year ago. It's in Soho, which was always my favorite area in Manhattan, and we're growing in a kind of controlled manner. Nowadays, we are dealing with various kind of projects, such as residential, private houses, hotels, mainly in New York and in Miami. I can easily confess that I would love to have some more cultural or public projects there or here in London. Okay, today I'm going to present you 5 projects, mainly cultural and educational, in a more detailed way, as some distinctive examples of our architectural approach. And the first one is the Antrepo 5 in Istanbul. This is one of the Antrepo buildings of Karaköy Port, was given to Mimar Sinan University to be converted into the Museum of Painting and Sculpture, and the building will contain one of the largest exhibition area in the city and hold by far the largest collection of the country. There's nearly 20,000 artworks that includes pieces starting from the Ottoman time and covering the whole Republican period together with some very recent ones as well. The building is located on the Bosphorus, very near to the Golden Horn, and the site was an important port and industrial area through the story of the city. Tophane is the name of the area, and it means arsenal. It's coming from the 16th century's largest arsenal of the Ottoman Empire, and in 19th century, the majority of the buildings converted into Ford Motor Company's factory. And by the end of 1950s, this area was being used as the main port of the city. And this picture is from late 70s, and you see the main port. Despite being in the heart of Istanbul, the whole area was kind of segregated from the city since its construction. It served about 50 years, and now it's the subject of an extensive transformation. And this is the building which was assigned as the new museum. It's a huge project. Our building is just a part of it. And it's not belonging to the project as well. It's an individual one. Okay, the warehouse on the side were designed by the prominent architect Sedat Eldem in 50s. Actually, I always believed that they had a very important meaning and a specific role in the urban memory of Istanbul. On one hand, they were somehow following the roots of their ancestors to distinct, the distinct architectural character of those buildings born by their form and scale was separating them from their surroundings, like the old days of Arsenal or Ford factory. On the other hand, and very clearly, the exposed structural grid on the facade was one of the most significant architectural elements. It was the most characteristic feature also of Sedat Eldem's architecture as an instrument of interpretation referring to the repetitive timber structure of traditional Anatolian architecture. You see some examples on left and an image of the old existing building on the right. As it's seen here, the office block in the front and at the warehouse part at the back, juxtaposed to each other. So from the very beginning of the design process, I defended the idea of keeping the main character of the building. I'm using the word defending because there was a massive pressure opponent pressure coming from various sections of the community. The majority of intelligentsia, believe it or not, including surprisingly members of the Heritage Committee, was somehow forcing, or let's say, persuading me to get rid of this ugly, bulky, and morose building. This time I used their words, but I was quite decisive. Okay, I like to emphasize that I'm counting on the phenomenon of superimposition for the growing cities, mainly for the growing cities. And I strongly believe that cities are getting wealth by collecting different layers, layers of culture, layers of social classes, various colors of different life experiences, and layers of buildings, of course, from various times. So we decided to renovate the building by keeping its main character, but also by adding some new layers of current needs and current ambitions. I can briefly say that it was a quite widespread discussion in the community. Not only the intelligentsia, but the man in the street was somehow a part of this atmosphere by the help of the press. And of course, not only in the man on the street, the politicians were interested somehow in the design. You see me with, at that time, with my black hair, about 8 years ago, once upon a time, explaining the project to Mr. Erdogan. He was prime minister at that time, and somehow he liked the project. This story brings me back to a actually unforgettable day in a different geography, because I heard the most sensational or even most astonishing statement of my life about 15 years ago here in London. It was a heavenly day. I was in a boat trip on the Thames, and the sky was clear, and I was enjoying the unique fluxional and the bedded kind of urban texture. Everything was getting nicer and nicer while I was admiring the stunning multi-layerness of the city. Somewhat later, I saw the National Theatre right in front of me. One of my favorites. I was captivated one more time, and I thought that observing this volumetric composition of this legendary structure from that angle was a great privilege for me. I was a big fan of this work of art since the first years of my education, architectural education. Strolling through my memories, I couldn't take my eyes off the building. Just then I heard our guide starting in all sincerity and confidently, ladies and gentlemen, now you see just in front of you the Royal National Theatre, the ugliest building in this beautiful city. I was in a deep shock, and I attempted to say something. I looked around for a while, watched the happy faces of the tourists, and gave up. So you never know, modern architecture can suffer everywhere. Shit happens every day. Let's come back to Istanbul now as a prime decision. We kept the reinforced concrete structure in the building as it is, and while the walls and slabs are removed in order to obtain a three-dimensional and kind of a totally naked structural grid which will house the container galleries of the new museum. I think that a museum should not be a sealed box which is only containing artworks. It should be much more than this. It should be permeable and accessible, and even while it should enrich the public life around it. So the ground floor is designed as a kind of a continuation of the public space, and the art galleries are arranged in clusters in the upper floors. Okay, these are some last shots from the construction site. The museum will be open in a couple of months. We see the main atrium here on the entrance area. The floor slabs of the former office block are removed, and that part of the building acts as the entrance and circulation core of the museum. The former grid, as you can see, becomes a strong architectural element, reminding people that this is this kind of, reminding industrial background of the site. Visitors enter the museum through a spacious hall, enhanced with commercial units and the workshop areas, workshop rooms, and public facilities. This is the ground floor organization. It's all public. As we go up, the galleries start to appear and they are accessed through the main circulation shaft. Visitors can walk around the galleries and access each one separately. This is what the interior gallery space look like. It's a white box mainly. Of course, it's a CGI. This is a shot from my last visit. It's a double height gallery with a beam in the middle of it. People will experience the fluid space quality of the building and enjoy the city view as they will walk from one gallery to the other one. And here you see the temporary exhibition galleries. They are nearly completed. They are located at the top portion of the museum in order to provide the necessary floor heights and flexibility for contemporary art. The restaurant sits at the top of the building with great views of the Bosphorus and the Old Town. And this is a last shot of the restaurant with its terraces. Okay, this is the end result. This is not a shiny and iconic new museum building. In fact, looking from the main road, especially during the daytime, one might think that nothing has been changed. And let me remind you the old building once more, and once again the new one. This time as an interpretation of Eldem's architecture. Eldem interpreted the traditional Turkish architecture, and we interpreted Sedat Hakkı Eldem's architecture. And I have to say that this was the effect we intended to achieve. Some very recent images from the same facade. Although the construction is going on, the contractor likes to try the new lighting system every night, and I like it. You see the containers as exhibition units, exhibition halls embedded into the existing structural grid. Gray and natural in the daytime, and lighted in color as the symbol of the port, kind of at nighttime. And this is our handsome neighbor. Okay, another significant cultural and educational project is the overall master plan of Abdullah Gül University campus in Kayseri, and it was followed by the design of two significant buildings of the complex that I will briefly present here. It's a site of a former textile factory built in the 20s as a part of the Industrial Revolution of the Republic, of the new Republic, from 1923 with the establishment of the Republic up until the late 30s. Mainly industrial plants were opened all around the country as part of the modernism and the nation-building move. Sümerbank Textile Factory was one of the significant castles of this revolution, of this move. It was built in 1934, and the factory was in operation till 1999, and then left abandoned until 2012, when it was allocated to Abdullah Gül University. The complex was designed by the Russian constructivist architect Ivan Nikolaev, and nobody knew that, in early 30s. It was aimed to be an industrial complex which has kind of equivalent urban qualities to Western world. This intention, in my opinion, can be described as the reflection of a search for a modern identity. Actually, we were contacted for a brand new master plan, demolishing all the existing buildings. And of course, on the contrary, we proposed to keep all of them and renovate according to new needs, keeping the soul and the traces of the industrial heritage as well. We came up with a master plan including cultural, educational, recreational, and even some symbolic amount of agricultural facilities. The new Faculty of Administration building was completed in 2014 as the first building of the campus. And it mainly is a new addition to an existing warehouse building on the site as the continuation of the overall master planning decisions. It was quite challenging for us to keep the overall spirit of the existing atmosphere. And of course, to follow the general architectural language for the new additions. This is an overall view after the completion. Of course, the existing landscape was a very important aspect to keep for us. This is a shot from the main entrance. Here you can clearly see the existing structure and the new integration. Some images from inside. The owner was very shocked when we proposed to keep the building as it is. The main circulation core. I'm talking about the president. Again, the spread of industrial buildings is sustained somehow. The main library and the night view. And the other significant building in the campus is the Abdullah Gül Presidential Museum and Library, the old power plant of the factory, and we converted this highly qualified building into the first presidential museum and library of Turkey. These are some images of the existing building when we were involved into the project. Okay, the research was a kind of a painstaking process, and at the end we discovered various layers of traces, and we followed them carefully. We worked on each and every surface to come up with some final decisions. It's a very important issue for us not to make the building look brand new at the end. So the major textures were, from time were kept. But I should emphasize that it was another period of convincing people, and it was hard. Anyhow, there are tens of stories about that, but we don't have time for this now. You see the building after the renovation period. Of course, again, keeping the patina. But I was quite happy that the First Lady was using this word, the word patina, proudly after the completion, and I think we did a good thing. This is the entrance lobby and the museum shop and the main exhibition hall. In the exhibition design, we worked together with RIA, Ralph Applebaum, a firm from New York and London as well. This building is not in use for some reasons. It is opened, but it's not in use. And finally, the library space. Once again, old and new layers are kind of reflecting clearly their times, but they don't beat each other. And the library from outside. Okay, once again, we are in Istanbul now for a Museum of Contemporary Art, the other project. This time you can see different faces of the city, a colorful, multicultural, crowded and chaotic one, of course. Not the official capital, but a kind of financial, social, and art center of the country. Once again, we are at the Golden Horn, this time at the other edge. Central Istanbul is the name of the project, the whole complex, which is an urban scale transformation project. A closer look, red lines indicate the boundaries of the site. And we were responsible of the transformation of one of the city's oldest industrial fields in the Golden Horn to become an attractive university campus together with some museums and art spaces. Actually, it was the Ottoman Empire's first power plant and served the city from 1911 up until 1980s. And this is from my first visit to the site. It was in 2005, and I have to say that I was truly fascinated with the aura of the place at my first glance, and we were supposed to develop a master plan concerning adaptive reuse of existing buildings and to design of some new additions. It's a large-scale and quite complicated master plan, but today I'll present you a specific part, which is the Museum of Contemporary Arts. The bluish building were the existing ones to be renovated. The orange ones were the foundations of two buildings, which were pulled down years ago, and since we were not allowed to add any new structure by the regulations, we were supposed to somehow reconstruct those buildings to convert them into a museum. And luckily, we reached the original blueprints together with some photographs of demolished buildings. They were quite helpful, and we were able to explore all the constructional details. And we found out that the main exterior facades, which were like light skins covering the inner cores, were standing on on some robust concrete bases on the ground floors, and all the technical parts, I mean turbines, boilers, and the others were located above those bases, and they were detached from the exterior skin. At that point, we were supposed to identify the kind of vertebra of our design strategy. Of course, the easiest way was to reconstruct them in their original shapes, as they were never demolished, but we thought that it won't be the best direction to go. It's a subject of discussion. Instead of this guaranteed way, we decided to work on a kind of interpretation, this time by abstracting the original volumes. We worked on the fundamental shapes of both buildings in order to get some clue about the essence of this abstraction, and we tried to execute a simplification and reach to the, let's say, primal masses of the basic prismas. And the final product of this challenging process was a simple and kind of impartial building following the physical traces of its ancestors. Here you see here the base part as the service levels of the museum, the core of the nucleus, as the primary spaces, exhibition halls, and rest areas, and the perforated metal facade as a translucent skin. Here is the new building with the others, with the olds. This is my favorite sculpture, rather than a fancy or, once again, brandy new look, as mainly new design museums have. Our aim was coming up with a kind of timeless appearance, embracing the industrial soul. But when the night comes, with the help of its translucent skin, the building almost transforms into a lantern, exhibiting its insight in an erotic way, in my opinion. A closer look from outside, the grand stairs between the different levels of exhibition halls, and the opposite, this time from inside to outside. Visitors have a visual contact with the neighborhood, and moving from one floor to another, they can experience the historical environment. It's a quite naked and exposed building with very few materials. Instead of creating a kind of gorgeousness related to the materials or expansive-looking surfaces, we were very keen on the fluidity and volumetric richness of the spaces. The main stairs, of course, the visual continuity through the floors was an important issue. Some large art pieces can be displayed in the space, which is in between the facade and the exhibition halls. The exhibition spaces are quite flexible, and there are many different ways for the exhibition designers to create their own stories inside. And coming back to outside, the natural skin could sometimes serve as a screen. This series of photographs is from a live audiovisual performance by an artist friend of mine. The author's skin was interacting with the perception of the building. It was about 10 years ago, and a real surprise for the audience. People were like mesmerized by the moving shapes appearing on the screen. It's a pity that I don't have it as a movie. I, on the other hand, like the potential of the buildings when they can become a screen, a reflector, or a platform of some different purposes. Okay, the artist's name is Refik Anadol. He was quite young at this moment, and it was his first performance in this manner. Just a couple months ago, 6 vibrant three-dimensional projections on the facade of Walt Disney Concert Hall of Frank Gehry are launched by my friend, the same artist, and his team to celebrate the LA Philharmonic's anniversary. Okay, now we will go to the very southeast part of Turkey, Antakya, or Antioch, with its ancient name. Founded at the beginning of 4th century BC, it was the 3rd largest city in the world during the early Roman periods. It's just another cradle of civilizations. A local entrepreneur wanted to build a hotel on his own land, and which is located at the center of the town near to the famous St. Pierre Church, which is considered as one of the most important pilgrimage site of Christianity, and he made a deal with an international brand. I don't know why, but Hilton is still very common and very popular in Anatolia. and started the construction according to his architect's project, another architect. He was planning to complete a 400 beds room hotel in about 2 years, and the construction team was ready. But life was not so easy and simple. Wherever they were excavating, they were encountering some archaeological ruins. And everybody was in trouble, the architect, the technical consultants from different disciplines, including the most prominent teams of archaeologists. They were all hoping to discover a considerable empty and convenient space to locate the hotel. After 7 months of incredibly hard work, and the kind of this team, I mean, they faced with the reality. The 20,000 square meter land was full of ruins, and this was extremely disappointed for the owner. This is the guy, as you can imagine. He split it with his architect, blaming him for not being sensitive enough about what was happening there at this moment. And he was somehow at the last exit and feeling kind of helpless. And the first and maybe the more rational choice for him was covering all and forgetting about this story. And I guess then a normal investor would do this. This was the somehow beginning of a long and challenging story for us, starting with an urgent call by a professor, Uğur Tanyeli, who was already in the team. And this picture is from 2010, my first visit to the site. And as you can see, the scene was incredible. Tons of layers everywhere, traces of different buildings, a bunch of incredibly bright mosaic, a Roman bath, a giant size as well. As I know, the biggest in-city mosaic in the world for the moment, with beautiful colors and patterns, sometimes even with hundreds of figures. The landowner was looking to my eyes to see a ray of hope, but I didn't want to be tricky, and I said that he should forget the project. Looking for a miracle, he was extremely disappointed, too sorry to say a word, and it was getting late, and I decided to spend the night there. Maybe it was my biggest mistake in my life. And the next day, very early in the morning, I went to the top of the hill, which is overlooking to the city. I spent an hour there and went down for another tour in the old city, and I walked around aiming to discover the specific urban scale and texture. And then I went back to the site once again and met the team of archaeologists. After some critical discussions with them, the owner appeared from behind the ruined wall, and it was getting dark once again. I decided to take up this challenge and told him that I will prepare a concept design. And the next process was extremely challenging. It was not logical to think about designing a conventional building in this land in order to deal with this unique situation. And with the name of very sensitive archaeological conservation, we were set into a tough route of design and bureaucracy, of course, at the same time. I don't want to bother you by talking about the series of approvals, starting from the local authorities, going up to the ministry and everybody. But I can say briefly that it was one of the most challenging professional experiences of my whole architectural journey. Let's see quickly how we proceeded. The plot was has a rectangular shape. It's about 100 meter to 200 meter. And the first reels before us were something like this, 5 meter to 5 meter pits with 5 meter of depth. And the findings are clearly visible after the archaeological scientific excavation. And nearly the whole site was covered with those ruins. But fortunately, with some exceptions, yes, something that was discovered during our process of design, I think just saved our lives. And this picture is from 1910. And you see the creek with yellow dotted line coming down from the mountain towards the city. And you see the site, which is marked with orange color on the plan. And we discovered that the old river used to run through the site. And it was quite obvious that its bed was changed and rerouted formerly in order to be aligned with the road. And it's a new thing. And apparently, there were no findings along this old bed, and this fact was bringing a unique and priceless opportunity for the project. On the borders of the plot with no findings, and along the old river course, there was enough ground for construction elements, which are the main load-bearing structure. To be exact, almost 24 meters deep pilotis was designed to carry the huge roof, which will protect the ruins, and at the same time accommodate an important part of the building program, which normally is located on the ground floor. Ballrooms, restaurants, spa, and even swimming pool, and the gardens are located at the roof level. I was happy because I was always going to World Architectural Festival in Singapore, and I was always on top of this Moshe Safdie's hotel in the swimming pool, and it was one of my intentions. The rooms are to be stacked on 3 floors, just like containers. And one important thing to mention, since it was not relevant to construct the rooms with conventional methods, the rooms were to be constructed off-site and then brought and placed into their location within the frame. And they are connected to each other with horizontal and detached connecting roots and bridges. It was like an utopian fantasy for some of us, maybe even for me also, but it came true. We do this kind of projects in the schools, but it doesn't came up to be the reality. The rooms which have been produced off-site came to the land on top of some, you will see now, some giant-sized tracks, completely different than the conventional building techniques, and it's quite new for this area as well. Even the transportation issue was a fatal challenge, but replacing them to their places with some very small margins, not more than 1.5 centimeters, was just a nightmare for them. Okay, these are some recent shots from the site. In my opinion, it's a miracle in all those with the war in Syria and everything. These are the rooms, and then you can watch all the ruins wherever you are. The hotel is not open yet, but it will be open in a couple of months. This is the lobby, and you see the museum path below. This will be the lobby after a while. And we see one of the most, let's say, alluring mosaics from the lobby as well. In addition to the lobby lounge and the gastronomic facilities that are located at the ground level, an open-air museum route was included into the program. And you see these are showing the relationships between public and private zone, which is one of the most critical thing in architectural profession, in my opinion. And the findings above, 66 columns and 66 drills with a diameter of 2.5 meters without any machinery, which reach to a depth of almost 24 meters, and the typical room floor below. And located at lower levels, the public circulation of the museum is totally separated from the hotel. Just a quick recap of what we tried to do. These are the ruins and the columns. Of course, we changed those columns maybe 17 times. It was not economically sustainable project for me either. I lost lots of money, maybe nearly $1 million. But you make it sometime. I mean, you see the roof is coming, and then the old river goes up as the slit on the roof as well. You see the museum path here, which will be all public, the closed part of the museum with the grand stair, and the entrance will be totally separate. And this is the mosaic that I was mentioning. It's about 16 meter to 90 meter. One more thing that I find quite important is the restoration of the archaeological texture. This work are going to continue for a while, even after the opening of the museum and the hotel. And I believe that this will break down the taboos of the archaeology, which is like an untouchable discipline now, and help it to amalgamate with the community. Because I believe that in order to like something, you have to learn it and you have to know it. These are from the restoration area. This is the roof level, with the meeting rooms, ballrooms, spa, specialty restaurant, swimming pool, and patio gardens as the interpretations of the traditional local courtyards. A view from this floor, and some other photographs from my last visit just a week ago. I'll go fastly. Okay, these are the interiors of the rooms. And the final project, back to Istanbul now. A couple years ago, a foundation called Sancaklar got in touch with our office about a project for a new mosque, and to speak honestly, as a prejudgment, I thought they were looking for a replica of an Ottoman one, because in Turkey, even today, when you design a new mosque, the first thing that you have to face is the figurative burdens of classical Ottoman mosque as a weird anachronism. And I told them immediately that I'm not that kind of architect, and this first meeting was finished in a very bad way. And on the other hand, I'm a big fan of Ottoman mosques and find them extremely beautiful. But today, I mean, after half a millennium, even though the construction techniques are totally renewed and different, I find this expectation quite pathetic. And it's an issue that we face every day, and we are accustomed to see some brand new replicas or even caricatures everywhere in the country. These are two examples from the latest part of the 20th century. The one on the left, a replica in Ankara with more reasonable proportions, but combined with a supermarket, and the one on the right, which is in Mersin. Rather than minarets, you can easily think that 6 rockets will start their engines soon and go to the moon. And here on the left, you see the original Selimiye Mosque from 16th century, one of the masterpieces of architect Sinan in Edirne. On the right, the brand new Ataşehir Mosque built in 2010 in Istanbul as a clumsy replica of its original. A few days later, the head of the foundation called me once again and came to the office with this picture. I think somebody told him that I had this kind of let's say, default, and they were willing to build a mosque here in this area. I was extremely impressed by the lake and the untouched aura of the valley as well. Additionally, he said that they were ready to give me a kind of a realm of freedom, and I accepted the project that time. In the beginning of the design process, we went back to the roots, to the antiquity, as we always do, in order to find a way of radicalization. And we saw that the masjid simply means a place to prostrate, and it does not dictate any form. It has to be clean, that's the only condition. So in a way, everywhere or anywhere in the earth can be a masjid or a praying place. We discovered one more time that there is no any formal definition in the Quran for a mosque or in another source as well. So instead of searching for new and extravagant forms, we tried to reach the essence of the ritual of praying, let's say. On the other hand, we realized that due to the intense pressure of global capitalism, Islamic architecture is passing through a very dangerous period. The danger of losing its virtue, its identity, and I think a very good example of such contamination is Mecca, where the Kaaba is, the most sacred site of Islam. Over the years, Mecca has transformed from the center of the earth, surprisingly, to the center of tourism. And nowadays, it's a kind of prime real estate asset. Big construction companies build luxury homes and 7-star hotels there. I think this kind of intentions, with this kind of intention, we can't talk about modesty, nobleness, or humility, or let's say unpretentiousness. They don't live here anymore. Take Sheikh Zayed Mosque in Abu Dhabi as another example, one of the latest landmarks, they said, of Islamic architecture, which became famous for having the biggest carpet in the world or the most bombastic chandeliers. It's a place for diplomatic visits, a tourist attraction, a place to see and to be seen at, a platform for Facebook or Instagram. Okay, let's go back to our subject now. The essence, once again, with the mark of modesty, humbleness, and humility. Sancaklar Mosque is located at the outskirts of Istanbul. It's an initial photo of the site. As you can see, it has a lovely view overlooking the lake and the wide-looking landscape. As an important decision in the beginning, we put the form away in the design process, and we aim to discard all cultural burdens which could affect the purity of our consciousness. And in this respect, we try to suppress the architectural language, of course, as much as possible. Actually, it's not wrong to say, it will not be wrong to say that this mosque is trying to tackle with the formalistic attitude of mosque architecture in all country. How we did it? We thought we could play with the topography a little bit in a very simple way. We placed the main spaces below, and with the help of a simple slit, we got natural light into the main hall. We were very lucky because this was on the Qibla part. And now, while approaching the land, we almost see nothing than a courtyard enclosed by some horizontal walls and just a vertical mass, which is the minaret of the mosque, and it signifies the place. This is the upper courtyard with the funeral place. You go down to enter to the mosque, the cascades, following the natural slopes. They turn into stairs. And the lower level, this is the woman entrance, where you can find the entrances of the main hall as well, the ablution rooms, library, and the small tea corner. Natural materials as local stone and timber together with water. Like the old Islamic Ottoman complexes, this is a place for gathering as well as praying. And a kind of outer meditation space. Of course, sometimes different users could enjoy the place, and I admire it. Entrances of the main hall and the ablution rooms. And we are inside. You see the mimbar, mihrab, and the natural light washing the Qibla wall. It reflects all kind of colors as the main decoration of the space, together with this writing. The wow letter from Mehmet Özçay, a very special calligrapher. He was always criticizing my architecture, but he liked it. And unlike the conventional mosque here, women can pray at the forefront. This was one of the most challenging issues of cogency process, but I liked it. Especially on Fridays, the mosque is full, and I'm very happy about the embracement of the community, for good and all. I believe that this building opened a door maybe slightly and turned at least a new and modest light on. A modest light for maybe a very small part of the world which is losing the sense of truth day by day. And I'm going to ask the same question one more time, if you don't mind. What could be the role of the architecture or the architect in this period, within this global context? So until now in EAA, in Istanbul, in London and New York, nothing is so different. We were facing with this situation just frontally, and even in this atmosphere, which is quite weird and uncanny, instead of being affirmative, or let's say a kind of current systems unvariant agent, without questioning what's going on, we believe that a producing architect could take a critical position and undertake a more opponent role. Instead of being defined as only as producing well-designed or good-looking buildings, we consider our practice as an activity about raising fresh ideas as well. I'm sure that one of these two images will remind you a horrible incident. And I'm so sorry, but I just want to raise another question now. Do you really know which one is the genuine or which one is just a game? Coming to the end, let me read you a quotation from the Quran, even if I'm not an expert. This is my favorite one. Don't walk upon the earth bragging. You can never cleave the earth, nor can you reach up to the mountains. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Emre. From behind me, I heard the muttering "wow" on several occasions in the course of that. And as I said, architecture is inevitably political. I wasn't anticipating your opening slides nor your closing ones, but I think you absolutely nailed that point. And quite apart from really remarkable projects and extraordinarily agile solutions, a really interestingly powerful antidote in your work to the reactionary symbolism of potency in commerce, in the political world, and the religious world too. So an extraordinary oeuvre, I'm sure we'll all agree. As I said at the beginning, we haven't got much time, I'm afraid. Just a little. Let's have some questions from the floor. There are roving mics, am I right? Yeah, Manisha's got one. There's one on the right of you. Put your hand up, and when the mic comes to you, please say who you are before you speak. Like I say, I'm prepared to sit it out.
There's somebody.
Where? Okay. It's helpful to have the lights up a bit.
Hi, my name is Aidan Potter. I was just wondering, I was intrigued by your marvelous lecture, by your approach to your parents' generation, that amazing generation of architects, I suppose, after the war. And although I suppose their work was very ruthless, it was an uncompromising modernity, they were also, I guess, quite a political generation of architects. They were, there was a brave vision for architecture. I just think it's so wonderful that you revere their work in a city that is 6,000 years old. And I was kind of wondering what your parents feel about your work in terms of that reverence for that generation and your positioning, because I think there's a marvelous consistency in that regard.
Thank you. Actually, they are afraid about my position. And of course, I mean, they are like the children of Republic, and they have a different kind of approach to the life, not only to the architecture, to the life. They have some different ethics. For example, they don't like me to talk too much. They think that an architect can draw and not talk too much. They don't like architects who does lectures everywhere, and they don't like my position in that manner as well. So they have a different kind of understanding. But coming to your question's more essential point, in my opinion, yes, I am like taking the stick from them and putting to somewhere else. but of course always with their help and with their understanding and with their support as well. But in a way, now we are in a community which is not political, which is apolitical, mainly in Turkey, in my opinion. And the truth is, their generation was not too political or political enough either, in my opinion. This is my opinion. Of course, there are some spots and there are some different people among them. For example, I mean, the architects was not too political, but the people who were in the literature was much more political, and there were some architects who had some relationships with them. But it was not something that they were reflecting to their works. They were always in meetings with them, talking about art, talking about literature, but never about architecture. Never think about, in my opinion, I'm kind of blaming, but they didn't think about the role of architecture or the power of architecture. So if you ask me about today's situation, I think it's worst. I mean, nobody is talking about politics in Turkey for the moment. Maybe just because we are tired of being beat every time since 20 years. That, I mean, we said, okay, it's a game that we never win.
Thank you for that. Are there any? Can I have hands up in the audience for who wants to ask the next questions? There's one there, and one at the back. So if we can get mics. Oh, let's have there's the one on the front on this side. So get a mic to you. Yeah.
Shall I go?
Yeah.
I shall thank you first as a graduate from a school that you designed. My question is that I have heard that in a southern city of Turkey, from one of your designs, Bergama, the guy running for mayor is planning to remove columns from your design to force a more open design. What's your idea on that? What's your thoughts? And what's your thoughts on preservation of architecture in Turkey? That's it.
Yeah, I heard about that from an Instagram post, and I called the mayor, and he said it's a kind of a stupid thing just for the elections, and then don't worry about that. And I asked him, I mean, are you going to do something with that? Because he is the one who is the responsible of this project. I mean, the current mayor. And he said, I think we can go and talk to them not to do it. But the thing is, in that situation, as architects, I think there is something that we have to do. We have to think about that. Why they are willing to do this. Did we make any mistake? I mean, this is a nice question in my opinion. So, of course, I'm not talking about preservation, but I'm talking about myself and my mistakes. Maybe we put lots of columns, I mean, I don't know. Maybe we can get rid of at least half of them.
And you have had some problems in Antalya, which is also in southern.
It was one and first and only building which was awarded by Miss Van der Rohe Awards, and they turned down nearly a year ago. I mean, it was something like, I wrote about that because I saw an article from Michael Kimmelman in New York Times talking about, I mean, in a very positive way about the renovation of Ford building in New York, which was a great building, in my opinion also, and they renovated. Surprisingly, Gensler did it, not David Chipperfield or somebody else, and it's a very nicely done job, in my opinion. And with this example, he was giving the other examples, the other negative examples, like the other buildings that will be collapsed or turned down, including the the curb. I don't remember the name, but it's done by SOM's Natalie Debrin architect in 70s, and it will replace with the Norman Foster building now. The building is 57th floor, and the new one will be just 70. I don't know, just for this amount of floors, should we do this or not?
I like the proposition of lots of columns, of course, and a lot of them are existing columns. And so, I think the proposition of long life, loose fit is very amply illustrated in the work, and there seem to be so many that actually a few less probably would be okay, even though it's a seismic zone. There's a question here on the right.
Hello, it's really good to have you here today. I'm Merve. I'm an architect based in Edinburgh. At the beginning of your talk, you said the object of desire is everywhere, yet none of your designs are objects. It's clear that they're informed by the analysis of the context, history, culture, the existing fabric. So you clearly challenge the existing situations as well, like the Sancaklar Mosque is a good example that you challenge the figurative concept, or you challenge the untouchable concept of ruins in Antakya. So that is really good. But as a young architect, I think I'm struggling to convince the clients or the people I work with that actually we should spend more time on the design. And the fast production of architecture, we're asked to design objects that could be located anywhere in the world, and that will still make sense somehow. But is that right? I don't think it is. But clients want cost-effective buildings. They want to be profitable. So how do you overcome this? Do you have any suggestions for young architects like us so we can stay design-focused and convince our clients that we need more time to design, but actually at the end of the day they will get a building that fits its context perfectly or good enough?
Yeah, you should be patient. I mean, at the end of the day, somebody will understand you or will be on the same page with you. Because I believe that if you believe in yourself and if you believe in your design, if you believe the power of your design, you will have some clients. And not all of them will understand you. But I think just 10% is enough. And if you can find 10% of clients which will be convinced by your ideas, you will be very successful. So it's not a very bad number or figure, in my opinion. Once I was talking by chance with Alvaro Siza, and he said, "Oh, you do lots of buildings." It was a critical moment for me. I said, "Yes, unfortunately." And he said, "So maybe you have to do less, because it seems that you can convince everybody." He said, "Yeah." I said, "Maybe." And he said, "Maybe they convince you." And I'm asking this question to myself every time. And in the office, I always say that if the 20% of the clients are convinced by your ideas, you are a genius. So in a way, be patient and do...
Aim for the 10%.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Even 5 will be okay.
I like that.
Thank you.
I liked your report of tough love from your own parents, Emre. And my own father, who died 2 years ago, would always say to me, if you have 2 clients in your entire life, in your entire working life, that you really, really felt you could empathize with, you'll be doing really well. Actually, I think he has a surplus. Now, there's a question at the back, but before we have that question, we've only got time for one more. So who's going to put the final question? I think you seem to have, you seem to have got lucky. So let's get a mic over there. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is
Yeah,
my name is Asha, and I'm an architectural assistant. Thank you for your lecture. I wanted to ask about the last slides that you've shown. So while going through them, you asked what the role of the architect can be in the world of politics, and how can we change it. And I was wondering, because obviously we can see it in your architecture, but you sort of answered also the first question was connected to it. But I was wondering what's your advice, how to sort of get more involved in shaping the world as it is?
Yes, of course. I mean, first of all, we have to believe that we are not the heroes. I mean, architects are not heroes. In 21st century, architecture is not a heroic thing, in my opinion. Maybe in 16th century or 17th century, it has some chances to become a heroic thing, but nowadays it's not, because we all are in a position that's commissioned by the system, and we are inside of the system. If we want to follow the rules of the system, it's very easy. If we want to fight with the rules of the system, producing inside of the system, it's a way, in my opinion. So in all the projects, you can have a kind of an opponent role, and then you can fight with some negative things. I believe that at the end of the day, just like I said before, you will have the chance to find somebody who will understand you and do the best thing with you. So in a way, in my opinion, we should not think that we can change the world, but we can affect some part of the world, and we can affect some people, and we can open some doors, or we can just slightly open the doors, and then we can show some lights to the next generations. And I think that's enough. I mean, we don't have to go for more.
Thank you. The only point in which I've disagreed with you so far, I think actually, we need to learn from the next generation, and I want to see more activism, yet more activism from the younger generation, because it seems to me that the people in power are not adequately responsive to the challenge of our age. So,
Of course.
let's hear it from you more. One final question.
Hi, my name is Haya. I'm a student at the AA, and I was wondering, at some point you said that you're trying to drift away from, not drift away, but separate somehow the aesthetics from architecture, or not look at architecture just as aesthetics. And I feel like aesthetics is one of the many parameters of architecture, and it's like the driving force somehow to attracting a lot of people. And I was just wondering, at what point in your career did you feel like your architecture was also provocative? Like, what project somehow made your architecture diverged your sort of take on how you would look at your own projects?
I don't believe that the way that I do architecture is too provocative, because I'm playing in the system, and I have some clients with capitalistic tendencies, and they want to make money, and they often come to me not even knowing one of my works. They come to me because of my name, and at the end of the day, for example, it's very funny. Yesterday, somebody came to our office. He will do for this moment, a giant size project, because there's nothing going on in Istanbul for the moment. And I asked him, which projects do you like? Which projects of mine do you like? And which projects you don't like? Is there anyone? He said, no, there's no any project that I don't like. There's no any project that I like. I don't know any project of you. So I said, okay, it's the best client that I can ever have. So if you believe yourself, I mean, there's an inner world of you. If you are comfortable in your inner world, it's okay, in my opinion. You don't have to prove something to somebody else. And I believe that one of the most dangerous enemy of the architectural society is populism, and it's growing too much. It's growing in a very bad way, and somehow some things can happen in a very bad way and become like a heroic thing because of the press, architectural press as well. So in a way, somebody can make some corruptions and become an architect who is like doing lots of provocative works, which is not true. So in my opinion, your insight is much more important than outside of the world. I mean, so believe in yourself.
Thank you very much indeed. I can't imagine for a moment that the work that you've shown us this evening is not popular, but I will pass your message on to those in our country who are pursuing populism very much, I think, as a threat to the culture of our profession. A very dangerous and in my view, reactionary movement in the country which we must resist. With that, can I ask you all to thank Emre Arolat for the most wonderful presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Emre.